Holy City Center Radio. This is episode 394, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, July 21st, 2025. What's up, everyone? Hope you had an amazing weekend. Welcome back. Thanks for joining the show for another week. I greatly appreciate it. My weekend was fun. I've got my family in town. My parents are here, as well as my brother, sister-in-law, and my niece and nephew. It's been great having them here. I haven't done anything too crazy. Gone out to eat. Martin's Barbecue, of course, which is one of our favorite places to go. It was great as always. And, just spending time with them, watching TV, joking around with the kids, and just having a good time. They've been able to go to the beach. They went on a tour of the tea plantation, which I've done a few times over the years. It's something different to do if you've never done it and just see. I think it's still America's only tea plantation, only place that, makes tea here in the country, or grows, tea, I should say. And yeah, they enjoyed it. Well, apparently my niece did not. She found it boring, but everybody else had a good time. And yeah, so they've been having fun, and I've really been happy to have them here. And yeah, looking forward to whatever else we do while they're visiting. Other than that, not a whole lot going on. So let's get into the latest news. Well, in the last episode, I mentioned how The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, who, of course, is from Charleston and grew up on James Island and, frequently mentions his ties to Charleston and South Carolina. And I mentioned how his show was nominated for an Emmy. And you would think a show nominated for an Emmy, you would think a show that is the top rated late night show in the country would be doing pretty good. And they seem to be. And then, of course, after I recorded that episode, later that night, it turns out CBS announced that they're canceling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Now, it's not done right now. He's going to have about 10 months, so that officially will end next year. He made the announcement on his Thursday night show, although the news broke a little earlier than the show actually broadcast. And yeah, a lot of people are kind of curious as to why that would be. Considering, again, it's the most watched show in late night, and they've been nominated for awards. They've won awards. CBS executive said in a statement that the cancellation was, quote, purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night, end quote. Now, I've looked into some other articles about this. There's been a lot of, reporting and think pieces and opinion pieces and things. And it is true that late night shows are expensive for many reasons to put on. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that finances were a part of it. But there's a lot of concern and thought that this is a political decision, and it certainly would seem that way. So, for some background, first, the announcement came just 3 days after Colbert, who, if you're familiar with him at all, is a very vocal critic of President Donald Trump and has been for years. He was taking his parent company, so CBS is owned by Paramount, and he kind of took them to task for the $16 million settlement of a lawsuit that was brought by Donald Trump over interview edits in an October 2024 interview by Democratic candidate Kamala Harris with CBS's 60 Minutes. So this lawsuit, Trump said that they edited this interview to make Kamala look better, and specifically just one answer that she gave. And the answer wasn't great. But when they aired it, they made it seem a little better. However, in promos and previews leading up to the interview, they showed that, not as great answer that she gave. So it's not like it was completely hidden. And even if it was, TV shows, including the news, they make edits all the time. Now, some of them are certainly deceptively edited, where, you'll see some of these partisan cable news, whether it's CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, etc., they will cut out a damning part of a response, like intentionally leave out context. This really wasn't one of those instances. They've got to make edits for clarity, to fit into the time frame of the interview, etc. So Trump brings this lawsuit. Really everyone, law experts, people in the news, they saw this as completely frivolous. They said there's no way Trump's going to win this lawsuit. It's ridiculous. This is probably even going to be thrown out at some point. The problem was the parent company has been trying to finish up this deal. They're looking to do a merger with another company. And the concern was the Trump administration would not approve that merger unless this lawsuit was settled. And so CBS, well, I should say Paramount, the parent company, they took the coward's way out and settled, like I just mentioned, for $16 million because they want to be in Trump's good graces. So his administration will approve the merger that they're working on. This led to resignations from people associated with 60 Minutes and lots of critics and comments, including Stephen Colbert. He basically called that settlement a big fat bribe, and that was 3 days before the announcement that his show was canceled. So it does seem a little coincidental, right? He criticizes the deal, finds out his show's canceled 3 days later. He's been a vocal critic of Trump, and that settlement was to capitulate to Trump. So it certainly seems like this firing, which is basically what it is the exact same thing. It's hard not to assume that, and I don't begrudge anyone who thinks that way. I certainly think that way. Now, the fact that they're not going to bring the Late Show back at all, so it's not just, hey, we're getting rid of Stephen Colbert. They're ending this late night institution. It's been airing with different hosts, of course, most notably David Letterman was the last host. This show has been on for 3 decades. I mean, this is a part of American culture. So they're getting rid of the whole show. So that makes you think, okay, maybe it was a financial decision, or maybe it was the political and they're just spinning it as financial, and they just used it as an excuse. Like, all right, well, let's just not bring back the show because it is expensive, even if it gets good ratings. This is our way to kind of do 2 things at once. So it certainly looks like this is another, well, we'll do whatever President Trump says or something he'll like, so that way our merger will go through. As usual, money and business are more important than anything else. And it's, disgusting, of course. So, there's been calls for investigations. I don't know what would ever come of that if executives were like, okay, yeah, we did it because we thought Trump would like it. I mean, it would just make them look bad. It's not like illegal. So anyway, we'll see if any other news comes out, but it certainly looks like, CBS and, the associated companies with it took a coward's way out and just decided, hey, let's do whatever we can to make Dear Leader happy so we can get this merger to go through and make big bucks. One piece of good news, although it's one of those, a problem was created and now the problem is gone, you can't really take credit for it, which is a classic Trump move. But the U.S. Department of Education is finally releasing some of the federal education funding to South Carolina that the Trump administration withheld back on July 1st. You may remember I was talking about this. There were different programs that were, designated for schools across the country. In South Carolina, part of their funding for things like after-school programs and some others, which we'll talk about, the funding for these were held up as the Trump administration was like investigating to make sure that these programs were not like liberal indoctrination, programs hidden in plain sight. And so basically problem created. Funding for these things is held, which delays the starts for some of these programs and made people wonder, are we even going to have these programs anymore? Well, the good news is, as I just said, all the funding has been released. These programs can move forward. Big surprise. They weren't some scams for liberal indoctrination of your children. So the money that was being held up was vital for after school and summer programs that serve thousands of students across the state. And as the Post and Courier previously reported, some of which likely would have been ended or reduced if that money had stayed frozen. So if the Trump administration had continued to delay a decision on this, schools may have been like, hey, we needed that funding. Maybe they'll release it later, but we're too close to the start of the school year and we can't get these programs moving forward. And a lot of these programs were for, kids in underperforming schools or, places where they may be coming from families with low income and needed some assistance, and whether it's, just after school, somewhere for the kids to be, or helping them develop if they're having any kind of struggles in school. It made no sense that these were being held up. So again, problem created. Thankfully, they ultimately decided to release all the funds, but it still was a problem that they created. And now, because they were held up, some of these programs are going to be delayed. A spokesman for the South Carolina Department of Education confirmed that the federal education agency told state officials that it's releasing South Carolina's $19.3 million share of the money, that they were supposed to have from the nationwide $1.3 billion budget, essentially, for these programs. One of those programs is Wings for Kids, which is a Charleston based after school nonprofit funded by some of that money. The delay will impact this program's students across South Carolina and Georgia. They also operate there. Because of the delay, it's going to, these programs are going to have to start a few weeks later than they originally planned. Now, that could certainly hurt things like school attendance, etc. Again, these are programs that are beneficial. Some kids really need these, families really need some of these programs. And it might not seem like a huge deal that there's a delay. And granted, that's better than these things being cut completely. But the delay will still harm kids, still harm families. Like I said, it could be like a school attendance thing. We can't send them to school because we needed that after school program for their, for parents work, especially let's say it's a single parent family. They've got to work, but their kids can't just take the school bus home and be home alone. They can't afford babysitters or whatever. These after school programs were ways for kids to be somewhere safe, to be taken care of, and would allow the parents to work and make money and provide for the family. So even a little delay, again, may not seem like a huge deal, but it's unacceptable. These programs didn't need to be held up in the first place. I'm happy and thankful that the funds are being released, that they didn't cut any programs, but it was just so unnecessary and is going to cause, again, even if it's a minor, inconvenience in the grand scheme of things, it was still something that didn't need to happen. Are you sensing a theme here today? Because this story is also related to the Trump administration, the decisions that they make, and how it affects us. The big, beautiful bill, as it's called, was passed, as you all know, and we're still waiting to see exactly all the fallout that's going to come from it. I'm sure there'll be some good things that happen from it, but there's certainly going to be some bad things that happen from it as well. And one of those things is us South Carolinians, we should be preparing to see our electric bills skyrocket. Not immediately, but over time. So this is a report from the Post and Courier based on some analysis, which I'll get into the details of. And I encourage you to visit the link in the show notes to get more information. But household electric bills in South Carolina will increase far more than expected in the coming decade due to provisions of that so-called Big Beautiful Bill. This is according to one analysis focused on the energy sector in particular. Only one state is projected to see a larger hike in household electric bills, than South Carolina. Now, the report anticipates $52.50 per month in additional charges. All right, $52.50 a month for some people might not seem like a big deal. But again, that's per month that your electric bill could go up. And that's every month. So over time, obviously, it's much bigger than that. And depending on, not that even if you're rich, like it still stinks that your a bill will go up that much. But think about the people who are already struggling to pay these bills. It's going to be even harder for them. So the study was done by a group called Energy Innovation Policy and Technology. They concluded that about 1/3 of the 1,000 gigawatts of renewable power generation that had been expected to come online, such as solar and wind power, won't be built because federal financial incentives are being stripped away. Now, you may remember as part of the Big Beautiful Bill, Republicans, just for whatever reason, a lot of them seem to hate solar power, wind power. They call it like the green scam and all this kind of stuff. They took away incentives for states, communities to invest in that technology. And so these things won't happen now. Those things were eventually going to help lower electric bills. And now without those, a lot of places are going to see these prices go up. So, like I just said, as a result, the organization projects that domestic job losses related to manufacturing and installing those power systems, is also going to be a fallout from this. They also project that rising household electricity bills will happen as energy supplies are constrained at a time when demand is rising fast to power server farms that support artificial intelligence applications. You may have seen some studies about this, how like chat gpt requires x amount of water per day, um, to run. And how you're like, wait, it's something you don't necessarily think about, because these big server farms, power servers, they require a lot of energy, number one. But yes, water is another thing that people don't think about, for cooling and things like that. So there's a lot more behind the scenes than you think, when you're like just using chat gpt, like how much power and energy and everything else that it takes. So we're thinking about rising bills, and now we're not going to have these renewable sources of power, it's going to be even worse. So, depending on the state, by 2035, households could see their annual power bills rise between $55, that's Washington state, they're on the lower end, and $640, that's Missouri, which is the highest end. And South Carolina tied with Kentucky for the second highest price increase at $630. This is obviously over a year. The difference in cost estimates are tied to state regulations and the type of power generation relied upon. So there's some that already have renewable energy, for instance, some that will still move forward despite the lack of incentives and those being taken away. So there's different things that would vary. But, $55 for Washington state for the year, I mean, it still sucks that your bill goes up, but $55 for the whole year, that's not horrible. But yeah, $640 for Missouri, or in our case here in South Carolina, 630 extra dollars a year that we will be paying towards electricity within a decade. If not, again, it might not be this year, next year, 3 years from now. It could be a slow build, but in the end, it's expected that within the decade, it's going to be up by that much. Thank you so much, Big Beautiful Bill. And our last story today, a controversial proviso about school bathrooms is officially in effect in South Carolina. This proviso was put into the state budget specifically to force students to use the restroom for the gender they were assigned at birth. It'll be in effect for 1 year. Obviously, some lawmakers on the Republican side hope to make that permanent. Uh, we've talked about this kind of stuff before. I'm not going to, make a whole, soapbox moment here. I just wanted to pass the news along, as we knew this was coming. That by putting in this proviso in the budget, it makes it so that schools have to do this, otherwise they could lose funding, et cetera, et cetera. And we've talked about the damage that this can do to transgender students, and the harm that these types of things can cause. And again, we've been over that. And there's nothing that can be done at this point in time. It's in effect. So if that affects your family in any way, shape, or form, you're probably already aware of it. But if you didn't know, or even if it doesn't affect your family directly, if you have kids in school, just know that this is something that is now in place. Now, again, it's only for the year. Obviously, people want to make it permanent. So that's the one thing about this, is it isn't permanent. And you can still talk to lawmakers. Let them know what you think about this, so that perhaps when they redo the budget for next year, this might be removed. Going to be a tough thing to do. And again, some of you listening may disagree with me and think this is perfectly fine. And I get it. But for those of you who don't, there's a year here where you can, let your lawmakers know that you don't approve of this. You think trans students should be able to use the bathroom that they want. And there is a chance that that could be, overturned, or well, not overturned is not the right word, but not added back to the budget for next time around. So just something to keep an eye on. And also just know that this is in place, if you did not know that already. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry this was more, although it affects South Carolina, certainly, and I mentioned the specifics to South Carolina, I know this was very much a Trump and Trump admin heavy episode. Not a type of episode I like to do. I'd rather be talking about Charleston specific things, and that don't have anything to do with politics, especially. But these are things that are happening, and these are things that are going to affect us in South Carolina and in Charleston. And if you're listening from other places, it affects you as well. So Hopefully we'll have some more fun stuff to talk about, or at least some more, Charleston specific things, not so much whatever is going on the national level, which if you've been paying any attention over the last few days, weeks, months, has been bonkers. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hopefully the next episode will be a little bit more fun. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. Until then, good night and good luck.